should have the handouts, see right up there. If you need, instead of putting the pens out, you can just use the pencils in front of you. We got the pencils in the pew there, so you should be able to use that if you want something to write with. But oh, looks like we're alive. So thanks for coming today. Like I said, if you want a handout, you can grab the handout that you see sitting on the sides or on the whatever you call those, the little front pew thing there. And then the pencils, you can use the pencils in front of you if you need something to write with. Today what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at Proverbs that talk about speaking and listening. And I have an opportunity to talk about how God says our doing of both is a reflection oftentimes of either wisdom or foolishness. So why don't we start with prayer? Lord, we thank you that you're a God who promises to use our message, the words that we use, to work eternal results. Help us always to value our words, to find ways of building each other up instead of tearing each other down, and to take the time to listen to one another. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. If you look at just the first one, it says words matter, and sometimes that's hard for us to understand. I couldn't get the audio working on this sermon, on this video clip, but I bet you can tell me what this sounds like. It's Charlie Brown and an adult is talking. And when an adult is talking, what's the sound? Wow, 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 right? It's and you ever get the impression sometimes that maybe your kids are hearing that, right? Or grandkids, or just wow, wow, wow. And yet, as the older you get and the more you talk to your kids, maybe when they grow up, what do you realize? It looked like nothing was getting through, but was it? Yeah, they were learning more than you realize, right? They were hearing you more than you realize. Our words can have tremendous impact on our kids, our grandkids, on our neighbors, the people in our neighborhood, people older, younger, whatever the case is. Words really matter. But sometimes it's hard for us to remember. If you look at the first one, what are three reasons it's easy to forget that words matter? What are some reasons it's easy to forget that words matter? Yep.
Well, one would be just the sheer volume of words that are used. We're talking all the time.
Yeah. And so you could almost, ever have a time where maybe you said something that really offended someone else, but to be honest, you don't even remember it, right? You had been talking, you're in the middle of a conversation, you say so many words, it's hard to take them seriously sometimes, so that can be part of it. Anything else? Yeah, Kelly?
I think a lot of times I talk without thinking of what I'm saying.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It just comes out, and then percentage of the time I want to take it back.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Sometimes you're not really thinking, right? It just comes out, and we've probably all had that time where we said something, and you almost wish you could reach out and just grab it and pull it back in, but you can't, right? It's just kind of out there. So sometimes you're just not thinking, right? It just naturally flows out of you. Anything else? It's the kind of thing that people talk about verbal abuse, and that's real. I think it can be a little hard to understand sometimes because we oftentimes think about abuse as being physical. But boy, I tell you, when you talk to someone who's had a parent who was always running them down, when you talk to someone who's had someone in their life who's just always telling them how terrible they are, you can just see the effect, right? The way it just tears this person apart, and where it takes away their confidence and their ability to serve with the gifts God gave them. And really is a sad thing to watch. But a lot of times we don't take that as seriously, right? If someone shows up with bruises on their face, you can tell if someone attacked them. But when someone's been verbally abused in one way or another, it's not as obvious, but the damage is just as real. And we're going to see Proverbs that talk about that talk about the damage our words can cause, as well as the good they can bring too. It's some of the best things God gives us are through the words of others, and also some of the biggest damage that's caused is through the words of others. So we'll have a chance to talk about that today. Another part of it is listening. Why is that hard? I think it can be one of the hardest things to do. Why can listening be hard? Yep, Sandy?
Because your mind is going at the same time, so you're thinking of what you want to say instead of listening to what they're saying?
Yeah. You ever have a time where Someone says something and you think, oh, I just had a thought, and you really want to get it out there, but you think to yourself, I got like 3 seconds before I forget it, right? So instead of listening to what the person's saying, all you're doing is thinking, I want to inject this thought I have into the conversation. That could be part of it. Yep.
I think it depends on who you're listening to. If they keep droning on and on and on, you kind of start to wander.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, if someone just kind of goes on and on and on and they never get to a point, it can be hard for you to pay attention. Yeah, that could be part of it. Any other reasons listening can be difficult? Yep.
Are we listening to hear, or are we listening just to, again, like you said, we respond back to, someone starts to tell us something, and we respond to that rather than listening to what,
Mm-hmm.
we start to interject, we start to find either solutions or reasons to whatever they're talking about, rather than to listen. Okay, when they stop or they pause, is that pause long enough? Then, okay, now I can speak.
Yeah, it can be hard to know when you jump in, right? Yeah, that can be part of it, sure. And also, too, don't you think that there does come along with that a kind of compassion and love that actually wants to get to know someone? Like, I remember there was a guy I knew he's a really good listener, and someone else who knew him well, he said, yeah, he's just very interested in people. I'd never thought of it that way before, but that is a part of it, isn't it? I mean, if you're self-centered, you just don't really care what other people have to say. All you really care about is what you've got to say. But if you're really interested in other people, then it's going to show in the way you listen. Right? You're going to want to hear them out and hear where they're coming from and what they're getting at. And so Christian love factors into how we listen too. And maybe sometimes a narcissistic selfishness can kind of be reflected in our struggles to listen. So that can always be a part of it. What we're going to do today is we're just going to look at different proverbs that talk about that, about speaking, about listening, what it looks like to listen as a wise person, what it looks like to listen as someone who's foolish. And so we'll kind of do what we've been doing. We'll go through some of the Proverbs. And then as we go through these first ones, I just want you to ask yourself, what does it say about what it means to listen either as a wise person or as a foolish person? So first one is Proverbs 15. It says, a heart of the righteous weighs its answers, but the mouth of the wicked gushes evil. He who listens to a life-giving rebuke will be at home among the wise. He who ignores discipline despises himself, but whoever heeds correction gains understanding. Anything there as you read those verses that tell you something about what it means to either speak or listen wisely or foolishly? Yeah, Kelly?
It starts with the heart.
Yeah. So it says that, and in what way? How would you?
It depends on what kind of a person you are. There are the grumps, and then there are the half full, the half empty. We're just all different.
Sure.
And depending on what you believe, that determines what kind of, in the end, what kind of a person you are.
Sure, it's going to show in what you say, isn't it? Remember in John 1, when it says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. It calls Jesus the Word incarnate. And you think of what that means, it's talking about the fact that it's in Jesus we learn who God is, right? This is God revealed, right? And how do you reveal yourself? You reveal yourself in your words. If you say you want to get to know someone, that's what you mean. You don't mean you just sit there and stare at each other. It means you talk, right? You're going to say something. As you talk, you reveal who you are. And here in the first one, you can see what? The heart of the righteous weighs its answers. What does that mean?
Thinks about it.
Yeah, you think about it, right? You're not just shooting from the hip, but you give thought to the words you use because you know words matter. On the other hand, how does the wicked speak? Just gushes. Isn't it kind of interesting how it says it just like gushes evil? You ever think of the difference? We've talked about this before, but the difference between lies and the truth. All right? I mean, lies, there's all kinds of them. Any brand you want. And if you don't like the ones that are available, you can make up your own, right? There's just lie after lie after lie out there. And there's a never-ending amount of lies. But the truth, how many truths are there? There's one, right? And it doesn't change. It doesn't care about your opinion. It's rock solid. But what's the nice thing about that? It's rock solid, right? It doesn't let you down. And so the evil, you could just gush, right? You can say anything you want to say, blah, 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 out it comes, just gushes evil. But the righteous, on the other hand, it weighs its answers because it has a respect for the truth, right? So you think before you speak. Anything else that stands out in those verses? How about the next one? It says, the tongue that brings healing is a tree of life, but a deceitful tongue crushes the spirit. What does that mean? What does it mean when it says, the tongue that brings healing is a tree of life, but a deceitful tongue crushes the spirit? Do you ever consider how God chose to make you a Christian? How did you and I become Christians? Anybody here become a Christian because you found a Bible sitting in a closet one day, you started reading, and over the course of it, you started to believe it? Is that how it worked for anybody here? I've never met anyone. I'm a pastor, I've served, this is my third church, been all over the country. I've never met anyone who became a Christian that way. How do people become Christians? Yep.
90% I think would be the way they've been raised.
Sure. A lot of times your parents tell you, so you're the messenger in this case is parents. Who else might do it? Friends. A friend might share the gospel with you, right? You may become a Christian that way. It doesn't have, there's always someone, there's always a messenger, isn't there? Always. It's not like we just find Bibles in closets and suddenly open them up and think, hey, this is an interesting book, and over the course of time become a Christian. That's not how it usually works. God sends people. On Christmas, who is it that told the world that Jesus came? The angels told the shepherds told everybody, right? It was the shepherds who went out and told everyone. Who was the one that was going to tell the world that Jesus was there after that? It was a messenger by the name of John the Baptist, right? There's always, have you ever thought about the fact that God chooses to use our mouths to share eternal things? And so you can see why I'd say the tongue that brings healing is a tree of life. When you share the gospel, there's constant benefit that comes from that. On the other hand, how does a deceitful tongue crush the spirit? Yep, Kelly?
It causes doubt, and it causes frustration, because, and you often have to stop and think. There is no, right now especially, there's no good answer to the non-truth.
Sure.
And it just, it's difficult. And if that keeps coming at you, instead of the truth, it's a mess.
Yeah. So you're talking about, the way lies can be repeated and it can crush you over time. You had mentioned, you said especially now, and maybe I don't know if you were thinking of this, but you think about the whole debate about fake news. What is fake news? How do you control that? All that kind of stuff. I think a lot of times people are left thinking, what do I even believe anymore? And that's a consequence to lying, right? You lie so much that at a certain point, you have a hard time even knowing who do I believe and who don't I believe anymore. And it crushes the spirit. You get to a point where you throw your hands up and say, well, what's the point, right? What do I do now? Anything else on that? How about the next one? Proverbs 11:13. It says, a gossip betrays a confidence, but a trustworthy man keeps a secret. What's that saying about how to speak or listen wisely or foolishly? What's that saying about either speaking wisely or foolishly?
Gossiping is foolish.
Yeah.
Someone tells you something in confidence and you tell other people and you're just crushing them.
Yeah. If someone gives you a secret, if you're going to be trustworthy, you're going to respect the secret. And it doesn't, no one else should ever know about that. Even think about, how does the Bible deal with conflict? Matthew 18, we hear about that a lot. In Matthew 18, how does it say about deal with the conflict? If you find someone's at fault, how are you supposed to start? Yeah, just you and him. So I always thought it's kind of hard then when you deal with kids, for example, and maybe they're having some kind of a dispute on the playground or something, and oftentimes they're said, go tell your teacher. But I think as a parent, I always kind of said, but if you can find a way to deal with it without involving your teacher, that would be even better, right? Like, find a way to solve your problem without it getting violent or anything, obviously, right? Okay, at that point, maybe we got to involve some other people. But, in Matthew 18, Jesus says right away, if you find someone at fault, what do? Just you go talk to them. Why? Because then only you got to know. No one else ever has to find out. This is going to be a secret between you. No one ever has to know. Imagine what would happen if people were able to go through your garbage, read your text messages, see your emails, and see some of the silly things we think, say, and do, right? It's good if we can keep those things quiet, isn't it? That's not covering up. That's what it means to forgive and to give people the benefit of the doubt and to help people in their reputation. It says in Matthew 18, if they won't listen to one, how many others do you take? 2 or 3 others, right? The bare minimum you needed in a court of law there to establish something with witnesses. So just take the bare minimum of people you have to involve. And in that case, once again, if the guy comes clean, it's just got to be between the 4 of you. No one else ever has to know. And then you kind of go out from there. A part of loving each other is respecting each other's confidences. It's helping each other with their good name, as opposed to just blabbing everything we know about everybody. Any thoughts on that? Think of how just against the grain of our culture that is. Where so many things are just put out there in the open for everybody to read, and they're condemned in the court of public opinion, and it feels terrible for people stuck in those situations. Even if it's true, even if they did it, you think, my goodness, people are just relentless as they attack them. How much better it can be if we could keep some of those things in. How about the next one? Proverbs 12. An evil man is trapped by his sinful talk, but a righteous man escapes trouble. From the fruit of his lips, a man is filled with good things, as surely as the work of his hands rewards him. What truth is that saying about how we speak or how we listen? Yep.
I would say basically the evil man is sinful talk would be lies,
Mm-hmm.
and then the truthful man escapes the trouble because a lie, they find out about the lie that causes more trouble for the other person. So
Yeah.
that's why the evil man, he keeps spinning another tale.
Yeah. Yeah, there's consequences to what you say. And if you're always sharing lies, or even if you're always just speaking foolishly, that's going to come back to get you. That's going to come back to haunt you. As opposed to a righteous man who weighs his words, he escapes that trouble. The second part, for the fruit of his lips, a man is filled with good things as surely as the work of his hands. We don't always equate the two. A lot of times we think if I work hard, I'm going to benefit from it, but we don't always think about the fact if I watch what I say, I'm going to benefit from it. But the writer of the proverb says the two are, each is equally true. Just like what you do with your hands is going to benefit you, how you speak is going to benefit you, or not, right? Depending how you talk. You think of examples where that. I'll give you a personal example. My brothers and I are horribly competitive. Always have been from the time we were little kids. And a while ago, my brother wanted to do this race. It's called the Iceman Cometh. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's like a bike race. You ride like mountain bike. And my brother said, I'm going to do it. You want to do it? It's like, yeah, sure. If you can do it, I can do it. And then I read about it, and it's like the hardest one in the country. I was like, we're never going to make it. Not in a million years. And I wouldn't, you don't want to admit it, so you kind of just wait. I'm kind of hoping he's going to chicken out before I finally chicken out. And then thankfully he chickened out before me. And then we got out of it. But that'd be, you can kind of, without even knowing it, you can kind of paint yourself into a corner, right? If you don't think a little, like maybe I should look up what race my brother's talking about before I agree to it. But how about the next one? He who covers an offense promotes love, but whoever repeats a matter separates close friends. What's that saying about what it means to speak or listen wisely? Just remember, Proverbs oftentimes are attacking a problem from one direction. So, yep, go ahead.
This is like the other one where what you speak has consequences.
Mhm.
Whoever repeats the matter, and it reminds me of the game of telephone.
Mhm.
It gets either better or worse the further it goes.
Okay.
So somebody adds to it or whatever. But again, it's, I think of the sticks and stones
Mhm.
can hurt you. So can words.
Yep. And here it's not saying nothing was wrong. It's not saying the person didn't do something wrong. What's it saying that love is going to do? You're going to cover over an offense as opposed to bringing it up over and over again. The holidays is a good example of this. How can families provide an opportunity to exercise this? I mean, is there anybody who knows more dirt on you than your family? And if you wanted, you could spend the whole Thanksgiving killing each other over your past mistakes. Or what can you do? You can just forgive, and you can not bring it up, right? We don't have to talk about it anymore. Don't you think that there is a point where someone says or does something in a family, and it's that person who said or did it that creates a rift in the family? But after a while, if that person said, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said it, I shouldn't have done it, and then everybody else continues to hold it against them, who's really causing the rift now? It's not the guy who said or did it anymore. It's the people that refuse to forgive. They're the ones who are ripping the family up now. That poor guy, he's apologized all he can apologize. At the end of the day, if you don't want to forgive, you want to keep bringing it up, well, what are we going to do? Where do we go now? At a certain point, the offense goes from that person to the other, doesn't it? And this is just saying, at a certain point, you cover it up. If you care, you're not going to keep bringing up everyone's dirty laundry over and over again. You're going to forgive like God forgave and move on. But if you keep bringing it up, you're the one who's separating things. Make sense? How about the next one? A lying tongue hates those it hurts. A flattering mouth works ruin. What's that saying about how we speak? Yep.
People should speak the truth
Sure.
in honesty and be honest and be supportive and understanding.
Yeah, what does flattery do?
It destroys you.
It does, with nice words. You'd almost rather someone would destroy you with evil words, at least you see it coming. But when someone's always saying something nice about you, they're saying, oh, no, it's fine. And they're never honest. They're doing just as much damage as if someone were just trying to tear you down. It's just they're making themselves look good in the process. They're taking away the unpleasantness of the confrontation away from themselves. It's a pretty loveless thing to do. Have you ever found yourself in a situation like that? Maybe there's something going on at work and you were the problem and you didn't know. You honestly didn't know. And then everybody else is talking about it, but everyone else to your face says, oh, no, it's fine, you're doing a good job. And you get the impression, I'm not sure it's true, but no one's going to be straight with you. And in those moments, what do you think to yourself? Just be honest. I'd rather you just told me so I knew than to sit here and tiptoe around and have a feeling it's not right, but then to have you lie to my face all the time. Flattery is not beneficial. It works ruin. Now, that doesn't mean we just go blah, saying every single true thing in the world without any regard for people's feelings. Remember, God says to speak the truth in love. And so we think about how we're going to talk about things, but empty flattery is never a good thing. What is it? A lying tongue hates those it hurts. Well, what's that saying about our words?
When the truth is found out,
What'd you say?
when the truth is found out, it hurts.
Okay, sure. So the pain that it causes when you see the truth, and there's a violence to it, huh? Like we said before, we don't always think about words being violent, but they are just as much as actions. And it's an act of hatred to lie to someone, about someone, whatever the case may be. How about the next one? Proverbs 29 says, if a wise man goes to court with a fool, the fool rages and scoffs, and there's no peace. A fool gives full vent to his anger, but a wise man keeps himself under control. What's that saying about speaking wisely or speaking foolishly? Yep.
Kind of like when you're in court and you've got a lawyer, they call them public pretenders, that doesn't do his job, and everything else is just a joke to him.
Sure.
And he only cares about what he
Sure. So that can be, yeah, so it'd be something where you kind of have that picture of a courtroom and yeah, there's nothing of substance being said. Doesn't help you out. Sure. Any other thoughts on that? Over and over again, we see in Proverbs, a mark of wisdom is what? Keep control. Huh? Not to fly off the handle, not to start screaming and yelling and shouting, to compose yourself, to think about what you say. It's so hard to do because emotions are so strong. And don't you think that the thing that grabs your tongue the most are your emotions? Like, long before you hit someone, if you're mad, you say something. Right? I mean, that's the first thing. If your mouth is how you reveal yourself, then boy, I tell you what, that's what controls what comes out of you too often. And he says a man of wisdom is going to think about it first. He's going to control himself. He's not going to rant and rave like the fool in court, which never accomplishes anything, right? But he's going to think before he speaks. Doesn't mean the wise man isn't angry, but what's the difference between a foolish man and a wise person who's angry? Yeah, a fool just vents, right? Just flies off the handle. A wise person learns how to control it. Yep, Al?
Just a little bit of a modern day way of looking at it too is anybody who's into sports and you see, things especially like in football where there's a lot of physical contact, a lot of words being exchanged, I'm sure, and sometimes the person who can't control himself, they get the penalty.
Yep. It is, and it doesn't always look fair, does it? Like if you watch two guys, and you can tell the one guy's going at him, and it's the guy who loses it who gets the penalty. That's kind of how it works, though, right? I mean, yeah, that's a good point. It's very true to life. So the officials get it right there, huh? So, how about Proverbs 16, verse 10? The lips of a king speak as an oracle, and his mouth should not betray justice. What's that singing? Carrie?
It means that he shouldn't lie about what he's saying. He should be completely honest.
Yeah, so you should think about what you're saying because if he's the king, people assume he knows what he's talking about, right? Kind of your example of a public defender. I've went to court for different members of church just to be there to support them, and I've watched as this guy's got a file this big, and then that person's life is in his hands, and he stands up, and instead of doing the work, there's no thought given to that poor person's case. And that person in that position, they ought to think about the high responsibility they have. Now, on the other hand, there's a big workload, right? And so I guess you go around and around on that. But if you're in a position to think carefully about the words that you speak, because it matters more. You can think of another example of that from life? I always think about that when it comes to election time, like as a pastor. I'm careful not. I'm an opinionated guy, so I got all kinds of thoughts on things, but I don't think it's a good idea for me to tell you all my thoughts on politics because it can be hard to separate what the pastor says from what the Bible teaches sometimes, Even if I say, this is just my opinion, that doesn't mean that it's, people can come away and they can say, well, your church teaches that. It's like, no, it's just me, how I think about this or that, right? But it can be hard. It can be hard to separate those things. And so sometimes you got to think about the position you're in. You just don't have the right to share your opinion on everything. You think about someone who's an elected leader. Got to think about how he speaks a little more than the average guy just sending out a tweet, right? Average Joe Schmo can just send out a tweet, doesn't matter. But if you're in a high position, you got to think about what you say because there's more weight to it. There's more meaning to it. People take it more seriously. That's what an oracle was. When you would go to the oracle, it was like you go to a temple and there'd be some priestesses and priests there, and they'd usually be under the influence of some kind of a drug, and they would tell you what their God said. And it's not a biblical practice. This is what would happen in pagan nations, so I'm not saying it's good, but the idea was if that priest or priestess said something, you took it as gospel because it was supposed to come from God. And so what's it saying? If you're in a high position, people are going to believe you more. So think about what you say a little bit. Think about that with your kids. I mean, is there a bigger person in someone's life than their parents or their grandparents? They look up to you. And so if you just vent and you fly off the handle and say something you shouldn't, it does some more damage, doesn't it? to think a little bit about how you speak. Anything else there? So the next one, these are just vivid pictures about speaking. So now these are just kind of graphic things. As we look at it, I just want to ask ourselves, what is the point of the picture, and what's it saying about speaking or listening? This one says, like one who seizes a dog by the ears is a passerby who meddles in a quarrel not his own. What does that mean? First of all, what's the picture mean? What happens if you seize a dog by the ears? You get bit, right? I mean, if you're going to seize a dog by the ears, you got to get down there and grab both. I mean, your face is pretty close to him. There's a pretty good chance you're going to get bit. So what's the point? Yeah, if it's none of your business, stay out of it, right? You know, that's something to think about. I think sometimes we misrepresent Christian love as always jumping into everything and always trying to play the better part. There are some times where you'd look at it and you'd say, you know what, this just isn't my deal, right? This isn't my fight. Whatever it is that's going on, if I jump in, I'm just going to make it worse. If I'm sitting at Quick Trip and I see two guys at the pump and they're arguing about who got there first or something, I might not help the situation by jumping in the middle, right? You know, maybe that's the time for me just to go inside and get one of those cheesy breadsticks. I love those things. Those are good. But, so something like that. And maybe not. Maybe you feel like you can play the better part. But there are times where you think to yourself, you know what, this just isn't my place. Any other thoughts on that one? That can be hard to know, by the way. You know, you can find yourself in a situation where you think, you know, if I don't do anything, then that's not very loving. But at the same time, this isn't really a part of my life. Is this a place for me? So one Christian could look at it and say, this is the kind of thing I need to get involved in. Another Christian could look at it and say, you know what, this just isn't, it's just not my place. So it's not always easy to know, right, when you're grabbing a dog by the ears and when you're trying to show Christian love. So Proverbs 25:14, like cloud and wind without rain is a man who boasts of a gift he does not give. What's that talking about? Yeah, why? What makes him useless?
Well, he says he has something and he doesn't give it. It's like the clouds, you want it to rain, and if it doesn't rain, it's useless. The clouds are not, up in the shade, they don't produce anything. Not using the gift you've been given.
Yeah, and wouldn't it almost be better if he just didn't say anything, huh? Maybe the disappointment of this is missed a little bit because we don't live in an agrarian culture anymore. So it's not like we're living and dying on the rainfall. But imagine you were a farmer and you needed rain and you look up and it looks like it's getting black. You think, hey, we're finally going to get some rain. And then it just passes by and no real rainfall falls. It's frustrating. And the point is, it's just as frustrating when someone says, oh, yeah, I'll help you out, and they don't show up. When someone says, oh, yeah, I'll give you this, I'll give you that, and then they don't do it. It'd be better if you just didn't say anything at all than to leave someone holding the bag over and over again. And what's the confidence what's the result of that? When you deal with someone who says they're going to do something and doesn't, how do you end up dealing with them in the future? Yeah. You just don't believe them anymore. I mean, you can talk all day long. You say, oh, yeah, sure, okay. And you just don't listen. So, yeah.
Sounds like Santa.
Yeah, like Santa. Glad the kids aren't here. We're going to ruin it for someone, yeah. Yep. Yeah. How about the next one? Proverbs 27. If a man loudly blesses his neighbor early in the morning, it'll be taken as a curse. What does that mean?
Waking them up.
The picture is you wake them up to say what? Say something nice. Imagine you're sitting at home, it's 5 in the morning, and your neighbor's knocking on your bedroom window, and you look at him, and you open your window, and he looks at you and says, good job mowing your lawn, it looks great. What would you think? He slammed the door down. He said something nice, but you don't want to hear that. When is an appropriate time to say that compliment? Both sitting outside, it's 3 in the afternoon, he's got nothing else to do. You know, it's not just what you say, timing matters, doesn't it? I can think of what, let's say you got a young couple, and the wife is mad at the husband about something, and this is a real example, and so she wants to talk about it. So it's the fourth quarter of the football game, there's 2 minutes to go, down by 3, driving down the field, turn off the TV, we got to talk about this. And the husband says, you couldn't have waited like 2 minutes, right? Like, just, and I started thinking, that's kind of true though, right? Timing is a big deal. Why would you do this? Why would you not care about timing? Because you just want to get it off your chest, right? I mean, you ever have a time like that where you're just mad and you want to talk about it and it's got to happen right now? And it's not about, that's selfish, right? That's about me acting on my emotion. It takes wisdom, it takes love to think, all right, we got to talk about this, but we got to talk about this at the right time too, right? We can't do this in the middle of everybody or whatever's going on. So yeah, that idea that timing matters, that's a pretty insightful thing, I think, to think about that as we talk to each other. Any other thoughts on that one? How about this one? Starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam, so drop the matter before a dispute breaks out. What's that talking about?
Just make sure that you know that you really want to bring this up. Is it that big of a deal?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to open, the floodlights.
Yeah, I did. We say, to pick your battles. We say that, right? Because if you get into it, other stuff might come, and it's not always worth it. You don't have to get worked up about everything. And by the way, ever known someone or worked with someone who got worked up about everything? What ended up being the end result? Like, how would you view that person? Yeah, you do. Don't you think you have to? Because if you reacted to every crazy thing they got mad about, you'd be running around all day long like a chicken with your head cut off. I mean, at a certain point, you just say, oh, this guy's mad about everything, so if he's mad again, what's the difference, right? I can't chase down every fire this guy sees. And if the guy instead would have thought, you know what, I'm not going to get worked up about this little thing or that little thing, but we are going to have to talk about that, well, then you're accomplishing something, aren't you? And so that idea to think about whether or not the collateral damage is worth it before you get into something. And if it's not worth it, then just drop it and live with it. Right? There's a lot of things in life you just got to live with. And it's a wise man who knows the difference between what has to be talked about and what maybe doesn't. So, any other thoughts on that one? How about the next one? These are, you might say they're cryptic, maybe on purpose, because it makes you think about it a little bit. And sometimes I think the Proverbs that you really have to stop and think about are the best ones, because they kind of get stuck in your head. And a lot of times there's kind of different layers to them a little bit, and you see them from different angles. So this first one, maybe not as cryptic as the other ones, but kind of eases us into it. It says, like a coating of glaze over earthenware are fervent lips with an evil heart. What does that mean? Like a coating of glaze over earthenware are fervent lips with an evil heart. Dave, yep.
Kind of like sugarcoating the issue.
Sure. Yeah, when we say you sugarcoat something, what are we saying about it?
Making something look better than it is.
Yeah, you're making it look better than it is. You put glaze over earthenware, it's still clay, right? And so fervent lips, right? I mean, someone who speaks with intensity and desire and emotion, and yet if they have evil intentions, it's not a good thing then. Jesus talked to the Pharisees about this. Remember what he called them? He called them whitewashed tombs. Why? You're all dressed up and fancy looking on the outside. You got your tassels. You look super religious. But on the inside, you're death. Right? Look good on the outside, death on the inside. So yeah, to watch out for making something look better than it is. So, how about this one? This is a hard one. It says, the words of a man's mouth are deep waters, but the fountain of wisdom is a bubbling brook. What do you think that means? Words words of a man's mouth are deep waters, but the fountain of wisdom is a bubbling brook. Any thoughts? Read a couple comments. Oh, go ahead, Dave. Do you have a thought on it? Go ahead.
I was gonna say, the wise man doesn't talk all the time, but when he speaks, you should listen to him, because he's got something
Yeah.
good to say.
The idea of their deep waters, right? I think with the deep waters, I think it is talking about, I mean, you think about when you talk, isn't most of it small talk, right? If you were to put a pie chart together of what you say in a given day, I would bet you the biggest piece of pie would be just small talk. How's it going? How do the Packers do? Can't believe the Badgers lost to Minnesota, that kind of stuff. But you'd have a small amount of it that's really big stuff, right? Where you're really showing who you are. Those are the deep waters, right? So words of a man's mouth are deep waters. You can really show someone what's really deep inside here with what you say. What does it mean, though, when it says the fountain of wisdom is a bubbling brook? Yep.
I would think that would be thoughtful, whatever the discussion is, as far as you're bringing up different pros and cons about things. So it's not just like one point of view. You bring it up so that all the people in the conversation, what about this, or what about that?
Sure.
It's not one point, it's not like half empty or half full, Looking at a cup of water,
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think it's something to do with being able to access it. I mean, if you want to get a drink from something, a bubbling brook is what you try to drink from. What happens, you ever been to like a quarry where it's just like cut straight down, right? And then you got water, and if you try to get a drink off the edge of a quarry, what are you afraid of? I'm going to fall in, and I'm going to go all the way down, right? A bubbling brook, on the other hand, it's accessible. You can get down, you can get a drink, and yet it's always there, right? I mean, it keeps coming. And it's always kind of this picture of being clean, right? And the idea that, I guess for me as I read that, I think wisdom is a bubbling brook. I mean, you ever talk to someone who they just use a lot of big words and jargon, and when it's all said and done, do you really understand what they're saying? And they might sound super smart, right? And you might think, hey, wow, I'm amazed you can use that word. I have no idea what that word means. But is that really wisdom? I don't think so. I think that's using big words. And I think a lot of times you use big words because you don't know how to explain it. On the other hand, you ever had a teacher who can just take something big and just make it simple, clear as day, right? They can just take a big concept and they can say it in plain English, and everyone goes, yeah, I know what he's talking about. That's wisdom. It's accessible. It's not supposed to just be this big thing we can't wrap our mind around, but it's something that applies to our life. And so you get that contrast between deep waters and a bubbling brook. I think that's probably what it's talking about, but that was one I kind of thought about a while. I'm still not totally sure. How about the next one? It says, the first to present his case seems right till another comes forward and questions him. It's an old picture there. I figure that way we can't get mad about it. It's been a long time. So I don't want to put a more recent one up and then never, But what's that mean? Yeah. You ever have that where the first one you think, boy, that guy's right. And then the second guy talks, you think, no, that guy's right. And then when that happens, probably we think, maybe I got to think about this a little more, right? It's easy to get sold on something till you hear the other side. So maybe that one's not that cryptic, but. And let me see, is that the last one of those? Yeah, I think that is. So the last one, and this is an important one to keep in mind. What is this saying? Who can say, I have kept my heart pure, I'm clean and without sin? Jesus. Yeah, that's it. There's one guy who can say he's done this. And as we go through this list of Proverbs on what it means to speak and listen wisely, I don't know about you, but there's all kinds of examples of things I could have done better, right? That I just absolutely blew. How easy it is to lose your temper and just, out it comes. How easy it is to say something insensitive and I even realize it. How easy it is to talk over the top of somebody else because you're more worried about what you want to say than what they have to say. It happens all the time, doesn't it? And it's so important, I think, as Christians, as we look at something like the book of Proverbs, to always do this in the view of the cross. When Jesus came, lived, died, and rose, he came, lived, died, and rose for people who put their foot in their mouths, for people who don't always listen the way they should, for people who can be very selfish instead of giving in the way we deal with each other. And yet, what has God done? He's wiped the record clean. And now he gives us the opportunity to live our lives and to take that forgiveness and share it with other people. And that's a beautiful thing to have the opportunity to do, especially when it comes to what we say. I think this is the time of year, right? We're hitting that time of year where we're around our family, maybe our extended families more than normal. And sometimes, and maybe you've got a family where everyone gets along. That's awesome. Or maybe you got a family where, there's some tension, right? And that can happen, I think. It's natural, right? When the kids are all little, they all get along, right? I mean, they have to. And then the kids grow up and they get married and they get their own lives and they get their own viewpoints and become independent. And then now to have them all go sleep in the kids' rooms again and to try to get together the way they used to, that doesn't always work very well. And so this forgiveness that's such a big part of the picture, isn't it? To have grace in the way we deal with each other, to let what this or that guy said go, to forgive them, to cover it up. To try to help people put on their best face. And if people lose their temper a little bit or say something they shouldn't, to deal with them in grace, right? To forgive as God has forgiven us, as opposed to just holding their feet to the fire all the time. So all these proverbs, I think, apply in very vivid ways when it comes to how we interact with our families over the holidays. So, any thoughts or questions on that one? All right, well, thanks for coming, guys. What we're going to do, I think we'll do one more class on Proverbs. I'd like to do a new Bible study on the new hymnal. It's just we don't have all the stuff. So until we have all the stuff, I don't want to do a Bible study on it. So at some point, I want to do at least 1 or 2 lessons just to talk through some of the neat things that are in our hymnal. But until that, we get all that in, we'll continue to look at different topics in the book of Proverbs. So, and for sure, next time we'll do the same. So I hope you can join us for that. Why don't we close with prayer? Lord, we thank you for the gift of speech, for giving us the opportunity to be your messengers and to share the word that you've given to us. Please help us always to build others up in what we say, to have wisdom in when is the right time to say something and when is the right time to be quiet, to weigh our words carefully. And forgive us for the times we fail to do so. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, thanks for coming.